Welcome to Tigio Court and Crime. Please like and subscribe to our channel, and do not forget to hype our videos.
On a cold December night in 1991, 4 teenage girls walked into an ordinary yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, laughing, chatting about boys, school, and weekend plans. They never walked out. By midnight, firefighters raced to a raging blaze at the I cannot believe it is yogurt shop on Anderson Lane. What they found inside would shock a city and haunt it for over 3 decades. 4 bodies, burned beyond recognition, nude, bound with their own underwear, gagged, and each shot execution style in the head. Who could commit such a horrific crime against innocent girls just trying to close up for the night? 4 years, the case consumed investigators, destroyed lives with false accusations, and left families in agonizing limbo. But in 2025, advanced DNA technology finally unmasked the monster responsible, and the truth was even darker than anyone imagined. On the 6th of December 1991, 2 best friends and co-workers, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison and 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, were closing up the yogurt shop at North Cross Mall. Jennifer's younger sister, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, and her friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, stopped by to catch a ride home. These girls were typical Austin teens. Jennifer was a hard-working high school senior. Sarah loved sports and clubs. Eliza was an animal lover with big dreams. Amy, the youngest, was a daddy's girl who adored animals and wanted to become a veterinarian. None of them would make it home that night. It was a typical Friday evening at the I Cannot Believe It Is Yogurt shop located at 2949 West Anderson Lane. Jennifer and Eliza had worked the closing shift many times before. They were responsible, dependable employees trusted to lock up around 11 p.m. Sarah and Amy had come by earlier, excited to ride home with Jennifer, and probably chatting about their day. Around 1 hour before closing, a man entered and asked to use the public restroom in the back. Employees allowed it, as was common. Investigators later theorized he may have propped open the rear door with something subtle, creating an easy entry point. A couple who left just before closing reported seeing 2 men sitting at a table, acting furtively. They believed the men were glancing around, possibly casing the place. These sightings were never definitively linked, but added to the unease. Then, shortly before midnight, an Austin police patrolman spotted flames shooting from the shop and radioed it in. Firefighters from the Austin Fire Department responded quickly. As they knocked down the blaze and the automatic sprinklers finished their work, the horrific scene emerged through the smoke and water. The girls were found nude. 3 of the 4 girls, Sarah, Eliza, and Jennifer, were grouped together, bound and gagged with their own underwear, and shot execution style in the back of the head with a .22 caliber revolver. Amy was discovered in a separate area of the shop, not as badly charred but devastated, but she did have .380 caliber pistol wounds, including one that had torn through her face. She had suffered 2nd and early 3rd degree burns on 25 to 30% of her body. At least 3 of the victims had been sexually assaulted. The fire had been intentionally set, likely to destroy fingerprints, DNA, and other trace evidence. The back door was found unlocked, pointing to the killer's escape route. Lead investigator John Jones, arriving on scene, later recalled the chaos: smoke and soot on every surface, water everywhere, and the overwhelming silence after the fire was out. The images stayed with him for decades. This was not a random robbery gone wrong. Many believed it felt organized, calculated, and brutally efficient. The Austin Police Department immediately called in reinforcements: the FBI, ATF, and Texas Department of Public Safety. Elvis covered all the bullets and casings, confirming 2 different firearms, a .22 caliber revolver and a .380 caliber pistol. The findings suggested possibly more than one perpetrator at first. Nationwide alerts went out for the guns. Hundreds of tips poured in. Over 50 people eventually confessed to the crime, including known criminals and attention seekers. Early suspects ranged from drifters to a counterculture group obsessed with the occult and vampires. One raid on a local home turned up theatrical props and animal bones, but nothing connected to the murders. A promising early lead involved 4 local teenagers, including 16-year-old Maurice Pierce, caught days later at a nearby mall with a .22 caliber gun matching the type used. Maurice Pierce implicated his friends Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, and Forrest Wellborn. But their stories did not hold up under scrutiny. The conducted wiretaps and interviews showed inconsistencies, and they were released. The case stalled, leaving the city on edge, and the families in profound pain. Barbara Harbison, who lost both her daughters, said in the aftermath, "My life was focused around them from here to eternity. Someone took eternity away from me." Bob Ayers spoke of missing every milestone with Amy. "I lost my daughter. I lost my first dance. I will not see her graduate." Eliza's sister Sonora, only 13 at the time, described fantasizing that her sister had escaped and would return, while her family fell into painful silence. The grief was compounded by the lack of answers. Investigator John Jones carried the weight too, promising families he would find justice. By the late 1990s, a new generation of detectives revisited the 4 young men, now in their 20s. Lengthy, intense interrogations produced confessions from Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. Prosecutors moved forward despite limited physical evidence, relying heavily on the statements. In 2001 and 2002, Springsteen and Scott were convicted of capital murder. Springsteen was sentenced to death, later commuted to life due to his age at the time of the crime, and Scott received life. The other 2 were not tried, but serious problems emerged. The confessions had major inconsistencies with the crime scene. A detective involved had a history of alleged coercion in other cases. Most critically, DNA evidence from the victims did not match any of the 4 men. In 2008 and 2009, appeals courts overturned the convictions on constitutional grounds. The appeal specifically violates the Confrontation Clause because co-defendants' statements were used without cross-examination. The men were released on bond, and all charges were dropped in October 2009. They were later formally exonerated, and the city of Austin reached multi-million-dollar settlements with them years afterward. This miscarriage of justice added another layer of tragedy. 7 original jurors publicly stated they would not have convicted with the full forensic picture. Maurice Pierce, one of the 4, was later killed in a 2010 confrontation with police after stabbing an officer during a traffic stop. The wrongful arrests highlighted how pressure to solve a high-profile case can lead to devastating errors. For over 3 decades, investigators preserved key evidence. Male DNA from sexual assault kits on 3 victims and a .380 caliber bullet casing recovered from a drain. Advances in forensic technology, particularly YSDR testing for male DNA in mixed samples and investigative genetic genealogy, are what were used to finally crack the case. In September 2025, Austin police announced a major breakthrough. The DNA profile matched Robert Eugene Brasher's, a transient serial killer and rapist born in 1958, who had committed violent crimes across multiple states. Brasher's died by suicide in January 1999 during a standoff with police in Missouri after being pulled over in a stolen vehicle. Further testing sealed the link. Autosomal DNA under Amy Ayers' fingernails matched Brasher's, and ballistic patterns on the yogurt shop casing were consistent with the handgun he used in his suicide. The monster acted alone. Brasher's had a long, disturbing history of murders and sexual assaults in places like Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Brasher often targeted vulnerable victims before moving on to his next prey. The identification brought science full circle on a case that had relied too heavily on confessions in the past. The 2025 announcement provided long-awaited answers, but no courtroom justice for the families, because Robert Eugene Brasher's had been dead for over 25 years. Families expressed relief at finally knowing the perpetrator's identity after decades of uncertainty, though the pain of lost time and the earlier wrongful convictions lingered, because knowing his identity would not bring the girls back. The case profoundly impacted most of the families of Austin, Texas, but the girls' murders affected families around the world. It inspired federal legislation, including the Homicide Victims' Families' Rights Act, which gives families of cold case victims tools to request reviews using the latest technology. It stands as a powerful example of how persistence, combined with DNA advancements, can solve even the coldest cases. To Amy, Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza, you are remembered not only for this tragedy, but also for the bright futures stolen from you. Your story continues to drive improvements in forensic science and investigative practices. What do you think? Does identifying the killer after 34 years bring true closure? Or does it leave many unanswered questions about why he chose that night and those girls? Share your thoughts in the comments. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more in-depth true crime stories. Thank you for watching Tigio Court and Crime. And remember the victims. Stay safe.